Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second day of budget deliberations for the Finance Committee of Rochester City Council. I'd ask that our clerk, Hazel Washington, please call the roll.
Councilmember Evans.
Present.
Councilmember Harris. Councilmember Patterson. Vice President Lightfoot.
Present, ma'am.
President Scott.
Here.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And I'd also note that we are joined by our colleagues, Council Members Gruber, Lupian, Ortiz, and Pio, and Council Members Harris and Council Member, who else are we missing from Finance? Council Member Patterson should be here shortly. We are going to start this morning looking at the undistributed and contingency sections of the budget, and then we'll move on to the budgets of information technology, finance, and library, and then we will break for lunch. We will go through each section of the budget, and I will ask anyone with questions if you could please write your name in the section of the chat, similar to the way we did it last time, and I will do my best to make sure that we get to everyone and everyone has gets most of their questions answered. We'll start with questions related to undistributed and contingency budget, and I'll turn it over to the mayor and the budget director for any comments that they may want to make on this section before we go into questions.
Malik, I just wanted to just announce who we've got on the call here. So from budget, we've got Sarah Boyce, the principal staff assistant. I refer to her as the Duchess of Undistributed. We've got Cassie Demps, our HR director, Chris Martinelli, the benefits manager, Sarah Cressman, our labor relations manager, Jeff Moore, our employee safety coordinator. So all of those folks get involved with us in managing undistributed.
Excuse me, BJ, Jeff Moore is having trouble getting into the link. He said he's not able to get in.
I'm sorry, I had him in the waiting room. I must have missed, his name is not exactly as it was, so I didn't realize it was him.
Okay.
He should be in now.
All right, we'll let Mr. Moore in. Questions on section 13, undistributed. I'll take any questions on that section of the budget from council members that have questions on section 13. Any questions on undistributed? Councilmember Gruber.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Just a quick question. It makes mention of the rise in the New York State pension rates, and I was just hoping for a little bit of clarity as to what that rise was, how often such a rise happens, and how we prepare accordingly.
So I'll start off and I'll let Sarah speak to the detail. But at the beginning of the book, we show a multi-year projection, right? And we've been looking at pension rates and pension costs and talking about it for a number of years. We think they spiked years ago and have kind of come down. Back in, I think it was 2011 or so. Maybe it was a little later than that. Where we were really seeing rises in pension costs. We actually, amortized a portion of the pension 1 year to sort of take the peak off that rise. And we've seen it come down really ever since as returns in the stock market have gone well and as employees have transitioned out of the tier 1, tier 2s and more tier 6 folks have come in. And so what we did in the current, in the projection going forward here, because of the, frankly, because of the pandemic and all the uncertainty around that, is we sort of, flattened out what we thought was, our projected decline. And that's sort of the, the go forward look. We just sort of, held it flat at its current level until we knew better. But I'll let Sarah speak to, rates for next year and what that breaks down to.
Thank you, Chris. Just a couple of comments to add to that. First, yes, the rates did go up for the next fiscal year. We get those rates 1 year in advance. And really, it's almost like a crystal ball to know where they're going to go. They are dependent to some degree on the stock market performance. So because those funds are invested in the stock market, if the market's not doing well, that can push the rates up for the amount that the employers have to pay, we being an employer. But at any rate, for next year, for fiscal 21, the police and fire rates in particular went up on average about 1%. We have people in all different tiers and all different programs, and all those rates are unique. But on average, it was about a 1 percentage point increase for police and fire. And that's their wage base, which of course is very large. So that resulted in about a $1.2 million increase, as opposed to if the rate had been flat year over year. And then for our civilians, the rate increase was very small. It was 0.1%. So that caused about a $100,000 increase in our cost. So out of our $2.2 million increase in pension budgeted costs year over year, the rates attributed about 1.4 million of that.
I'm sorry, could you explain to me, I excuse my ignorance, but why is it a different rate for the different bargaining units? Is that how it works?
It's partly that police and fire are different, but also within police and fire, we have tiers. So if you have been around for, 30, 40 years, you're in a earlier tier, like 1 or 2, and you have a more generous pension benefit. So in order to pay for that, we pay a much higher rate. So we might pay 25% of someone's salary every year if they're in tier 1 or 2. If they're a newer hire and they're in tier 6, for example, they have a less generous pension benefit. And so we pay a much lower rate for those folks. But so when I'm telling you the 1%, that's just sort of this blended increase across all of our tiers and all of our mix of staff.
Thank you. Malik, can I just ask one other quick question, then I'm done on this section?
Go ahead,
I just wanted to ask about credit card fees. I know it's not the biggest line in the budget, but on page 13, 14, it's $300,000. And I'm just wondering, is there any way to tighten belts on that in terms of, is that a result of late payments and interest rates, or is it just a matter of that's the set number that we have to pay for the amount of credit cards that we have?
It's based on what the cost that we absorb relative to the transaction fees on credit card transactions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I'll note that we've been joined by Councilmember Patterson. Vice President Lightfoot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to everybody. Just want to page 13.4, just want to ask about the hospital medical insurance. Just want an understanding of the agreement. It speaks about the coverage of the city. My first question is, what are the differences between the administrative, professional, technical employees and confidential employees?
The professional employees are a higher level. They're the what we call APT, administrative. They get into the administrative level. Confidential employees just work in particular, not just, but work in particular areas where their work is seen as more confidential. So that would be, for instance, in human resources. All employees in human resources are confidential. There are other work that particular employees do, maybe in the mayor's office, maybe in finance, and it's seen as confidential in nature.
Okay, thank you. There's a negative $3 million appears to be savings as a result of this agreement. What happens after December 31st, 2021 with this agreement? What does that process look like?
So there's a labor management healthcare committee, right, that negotiates with it's staffed by city personnel as well as union members. And Tassie's on that committee, so I'll let her speak to it. But there's a negotiation process that goes on, and we have an MOA that's in place. And until a new MOA is signed upon, the existing one sort of stays in effect. Tassie, do you want to talk through that?
So the December 31st, 2021 is the duration of the current memorandum of agreement that we have with the Labor Management Healthcare Committee. Upon, after that date, we would go back and negotiate, working with our union members to negotiate another agreement, which is a partnership between the city administration and our union administration. The purpose of this is to be efficient as possible in mitigating increasing costs in our healthcare. And by forming this by forming this partnership between the unions and the city administration, we've been able to work together over 15, 20 plus years to hold our increases in healthcare costs.
Is it possible, Director Tatsy, to get a copy of the Labor Management Healthcare Committee members, to get a list
Sure.
of who those members are, please?
Yes.
And thank you. And my last and final question on this particular area is on 13.8, under the disabled firefighters old pension. And one of the major changes is the head count. It speaks of negative $123,600. Could you please explain to me, when that says head count and recent experience, is that because someone expired or no longer is in the pension system, or what? How do we get to that 123.6 savings?
I'll ask Sarah Boyce to address that.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. Yeah, so this number does move around a bit. It's a bit hard to predict year to year. People do reach a certain age and then they age out of this program. So then they sort of come off of our rolls. But during the year, you know, we could have someone new come on the rolls. So for example, about 5 years ago, we had about 63 people in this category. Now we're down to about 59. And in addition, to project this number, we look at the average amount we're paying per person at any given time. So we take that amount and we kind of project it out. So it's a mix of headcount and of the mix of people that we have and the amount that they're being paid.
So when you say 59, is that 59 disabled firefighters through the history of, you know, of course, them being in this system from the whole time of having any disabled firefighter?
No, that's the number currently on the rolls, currently receiving these payments.
Got you. Okay. But that can go back several years, of course, depending on their age.
Oh, yes. Some of these people have been on there for several years, correct.
Okay. Thank you.
President Scott and then Councilmember Ortiz.
Briefly, going back to the question about the credit card fees. Chris, you said that's for the fees for our transactions? What?
Yeah, so for credit card companies to, just like when you go to a store, you know, if you, a credit card transaction, they charge a, you know, a VIG, right? They charge a fee. It's a, you know, 2.5% type thing. 3% typically at stores. So that is that percentage that we have to pay on these transactions.
But we don't pay it if we pay it one time, right? I mean, you don't.
In other words, if someone pays a bill through us on a credit card transaction, right? We pay the fee.
See, I thought we didn't. I thought people had to pay the transaction fees if they paid us by credit card. There was a conversation we had the other day, Mayor, I think.
So there's a convenience fee. It sort of depends on the point of sale, but there's a convenience fee that's charged on certain transactions. But for instance, like at TVA, the way that system is set up with NCourt, any transactions there's actually a surcharge on the transaction, and that's paid to NCourt. It doesn't come out of sort of our pocket, right? But at City Hall, for instance, if someone's paying, you know, if someone's paying a bill at City Hall with a credit card transaction, we pay the 2 or 2.5%, whatever that. I'm not sure what the current rate is, but that's what we pay that, and that those costs are captured and reflected in undistributed.
And you said if it was, what was the other place you said? That
I'm sorry, Traffic Violations Agency.
And if they pay online, then that cost is borne by the person that's paying online. So we charge a convenience fee for being able to pay online as a credit card. That charge is then given to the person that's paying online as a convenience fee.
Okay, well, maybe I'm not asking the question right. When do we pay the transaction fee?
So if someone comes to City Hall to pay a bill and pays
Yeah.
with a credit card,
Yeah,
we pay the transaction fee.
gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Ortiz.
Okay, well, so my credit card question was asked because I know I've paid online and it's like $10 or $15 extra. So thank you for that clarification in terms of showing up in person versus doing it online. The question that I had, I think it's workers' compensation. It's on 13.5 and it shows the chargebacks per department, and was hoping for a little bit more in explanation around the environmental services chargeback, which seems to be so much larger than any of the other departments, you know, and police and fire stands out to me as ones that would have been larger. Can you clarify or explain why DES seems to be that much more than like even police and fire departments for chargebacks? Is there safety issues going on, or what's happening there?
So in terms of how workers' comp works, the workers' comp expenses here, you know, that are budgeted or not, police and fire are not budgeted here. That's why you're not seeing police and fire. So the costs associated with, and we talked about this the other day, medical and police and fire are paid, you know, out of those budgets, those operating budgets. The rest of the city is sort of centralized here. And the reason DES is so, you know, disproportionate is because of the number of employees they have and the nature of the work versus the other departments, right? So you've got refuse, you know, workers, the special service workers, et cetera. So that's where, you know, a lot of the costs are. Jeff, I don't know if you want to, you know, say more about any of the workers' comp experience in DES.
Jeff, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. DS makes up the largest portion of our non-uniform workforce. They do most of the physical labor jobs for the city, and most of our injuries are focused in that area. So they tend to make up about 70% of all the injuries that occur within city operations.
Right, and I understand that. I mean, that I understand the nature of the work, but I guess, so the police and fire numbers there, if those are out of their budgets, then what are these numbers? Are these civilians or something that don't come out of their operating budget then?
Yeah, the police and fire will be civilian.
That's correct, that's the civilians.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Which could include animal control, for example.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, briefly, let's go to Councilmember Lupien, and then Councilmember Lightfoot had another question about credit cards. Then I want to move on to contingency. So Councilmember Lupien.
Why don't you follow up, have Vice President, and then I'll go next.
Okay, Vice President Lightfoot, you had a quick question, follow up on credit cards?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Evans. I know at one point in time, we were not taking American Express. Are we now taking American Express cards?
I don't know the answer to that, but I'll get back to you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Lupien.
My question is on the assisted employer assisted housing initiative. The 150,000 that we're budgeting, how many people does that help? And can we get a list of maybe just the number of people that we've served last year?
Sure, we can get you that number. Sarah, do you have a breakdown of how many of that people that would serve?
Yeah, so that would typically serve 25 people, and we do tend to get very close to using all of that money each year. So it has been a very successful program. And I'd be happy to work with NBD. They process these requests, and I'll work with them to get you a list.
Okay, thank you. And then just curious, motor equipment benefits credit, what is that?
So in the operation out at the Department of Environmental Services, the garage that does all the vehicle repair, we fully load the costs associated with that. So this budget, so when we charge departments back, we charge them, the direct costs, but also the benefit costs. Right? So the benefit credits, are reflected here.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Patterson, and then let's move on to contingency, please. Councilmember Patterson.
Okay, circling back around to the $300,000, what would we have to do to ensure going forward that that fee was paid by the card holder?
I'll have to talk with finance about whether or not we're able to do that. Oftentimes contracts with credit card companies prohibit you from passing that transaction fee along. But I'll talk with finance about that and get back to you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to contingency. Questions on contingency? Okay, no questions on contingency?
I know I had one. Hold on one second. Can we just talk about the reduction? And it looks pretty, because there was a note in here that says the contingency was 8.5 million and now we're budgeting 2.7. Can we just talk a little bit about how we arrived at this particular figure versus the, I guess, the trajectory downward, 8 to 3 to forward back down to 2.7? Can we just talk, tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. So, contingency, typically the biggest driver of the contingency number is, labor contracts that are expired, right? So this is where we'll budget, funding for contracts that will be in negotiation in any given year. And so if contracts are out and expired 2 years, for instance, that number grows because we've got to carry the prior, what we have to make an estimate on the prior year, what the wage settlement would likely to be, and then the next year as well. So back in 18-19, I think, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the police contract had been out of contract for a couple of years. And so we had to settle that. So that's one of the reasons that number was so high. I believe there were a couple of other contracts also, out of contract at that point. So we were making allowances for those wage settlements there. So the reason it's lower going into next year is that the allowance, given the current pandemic, et cetera, the allowance that we made for any out of contract wage settlements is much smaller, and we've reduced our contingency as well. Just again, because we had to tighten our belts. So that's why you see that sort of go down over the past couple of years.
Okay, so thank you. But just quick, don't we have two of the unions that are the contracts that expire at the end of the month? I thought there were two of them that at the end of the month that were expiring, and I thought I saw on a page here that the expiration date for the police one was last year. Am I incorrect with that? So we still have.
You're correct with police.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sarah, can you speak to?
There were two coming due.
Sarah Cressman, can you speak to the timeline for the contracts, please?
Yes, so the police contract that expired June of 19.
Yeah, okay.
And then the AFSCME part-time contract expires June 30th of this year.
Okay, so it's just a part-time and we're not, okay, it's not as big of a piece, so we're not as worried in terms of that budget for, but well, the fact that the police one from June of 19, are we not worried about the fact that this is so low and then not still having had a contract secured yet? I mean, because don't we at the end of the day, when it's finally secured, we end up having to retroactive pay back whatever the end of the agreement is, then we have to pay all of that money retroactively, don't we?
Correct, we do. And so, we make allocations, and we also accrue liabilities, right? So for instance, in the 1920 budget, right? If that amount, if that contract isn't settled, right? Then, and it won't be, I don't expect it to be, let's put it that way. Then we'll accrue a liability for that. So the money doesn't necessarily go away, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, so we'll have an allocation in 2021 that's making an assumption around what that might be. Is it given the way these contracts work and they can ultimately go to arbitration, there's certainly risk in that number, don't get me wrong. But given the pandemic and where we are, remember, we had, a 0% cost of living increase for, all APT and confidential this year, anybody out of contract, right? So again, the assumptions are on the fact that, we had this pandemic and that's where we are.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, Councilmember Loopy, and you had a question on contingency?
Yes. The settlements that get paid out due to, police, like misconduct, does that get paid out of this, or does that come out of a different fund?
No, typically, well, it depends on the size of the settlement, but typically those things come out of our insurance reserve.
Okay. And is that part of the budget anywhere?
No. Within undistributed, we make provisions for certain transfers to the insurance reserve. So it's typically at the end of year. And I think this year, Sarah, isn't there a large one anticipated for refuse? Sarah Boyce?
Right, correct. So I'm trying to find the page. So on page 13-11, in the middle of that page, you'll see an item called contributions to insurance reserve. And so what we do here is if during the fiscal year we paid something out from a non-general fund, so like from the refuse fund, for example, then in the following year, we budget that amount in refuse and we have them pay the general fund back. It's a bit of a accounting process, but you will see that increase year over year from fiscal 20 to 21, because we did have a large item in the refuse fund last year.
So and that's a known right after the fact, but it's not limited to police settlements. It can be any kind of settlement. As we're self-insured, that comes out of the insurance reserve.
Okay, so it's kind of all lumped together. So from last year to this year, we're budgeting for almost 467,000 more.
Right, and it's coming out of the refuse fund to replenish the insurance reserve for a settlement that was made relative to an accident in the refuse fund. Correct.
Okay. When accidents happen like this, or payments are, claims are settled, does that increase our insurance rate?
So we're self-insured for
right.
most of these things. I mean, we do have some, some umbrella coverage. We've talked about getting some umbrella coverage, actually. We've got, insurance on certain facilities, but overall, the city is self-insured. So we don't have a typical insurance policy around some of the stuff.
Right. So it's our money either way. It's just
Correct.
coming out of a different fund. Okay. Thank you.
All right. We're going to move on to information technology. We're going to take a 30-second pause to make sure everyone in from IT that needs to be here on the line currently, Mr. Scanlon?
I believe so.
Okay, great. Let's move right into IT. Mr. Gautier, I want to turn it over to you to make any comments that you might want to make, and then we'll get right into questions on the IT section of the budget.
I don't really have a whole lot to say except to introduce my team. So this morning we have Bill Boudreau, who's the Director of IT Operations. He's really the Assistant IT Director. We have Harriet, who's the manager of apps and systems. We have Joe Rossi, who's the chief information security officer. We have Sharon Now, who's the infrastructure and operations manager. And we have Richard Wright, who's the manager of telecom and networking.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gautier, and thank you for your team for being here. I'll start entertaining questions on the IT section of the budget. I have one just broad question, and I ask this question regularly every year because I see a lot of what's happening with hospitals and other municipalities as it relates to ransom attacks. Can you talk a little bit about how you feel the budget this year works to combat those things, and also what you see as, without talking about our own, obviously, security protocols, what things we should be doing as employees to ensure that we are working to combat these types of things that we're seeing around you.
Yeah, so what I would say is IT budget, really, we've reduced in most areas, and I would say pretty considerably. The one area that's an exception to that is IT security. At the beginning of the pandemic, I'm sort of tuned into some of the other cities, Albany, et cetera, some of the other IT managers. And so we're all coordinated in our fight against those kinds of ransomware attacks. We had several early on in the pandemic that we addressed pretty aggressively. You probably saw some emails come out. The appointment of Joe Rossi as the Chief Information Security Officer, he's the first person to hold that role at the City of Rochester. He's got a team with him responsible for IT security. At the end of the day, we've moved some security stuff to the cloud. We have a lot of security on-prem. At the end of the day, though, you're absolutely right. Most of the security, and particularly with ransomware attacks, are the responsibility of the end user. So
Right.
We've sort of shifted our information security training more towards that type of an attack, where we've tried to get the message out that IT security is really everybody's responsibility. And so the way we've kind of continued that is just reiterating that message constantly, that IT security and information security is everyone's responsibility, and to just make people aware.
Right. And then, with this pandemic, one of the things that I'm realizing is, not just here at the city, but other places, is the importance of being able to recalibrate quickly to be able to work from wherever it is that you are. How do you feel going forward with us having the ability and the bandwidth to be able to move as quickly as we did last time if something like this was to happen again, as it relates from an infrastructure perspective?
What I would say is that I think we did okay in this, during the initial parts of this pandemic. I certainly think we can do better. And so, for example, one of the areas that we weren't prepared for was, we had some remote access and VPN issues. We quickly spun up 2 new VPN servers. One of the things that we did not enable, just from the sort of posterity reasons, was our ability to check your computer for compliance. That is a capability we have. So before you connect to the VPN server, we can turn on our ability to check to make sure that your system is patched, et cetera, et cetera. So I think next time, the security team and myself and Bill are reviewing these protocols, and we'll have a much more planned out response to these kinds of activities.
Thank you. Councilmember Gruber.
Yes, thank you. And Director Gautier, I appreciate you saying that you think you can do better, but I think the IT department really shined when we had to transfer everyone to work from home. So kudos to you and your team. And of course, Mayor Warren for scouring the, I believe, two countries looking for an IT director. So kudos there. I have a couple questions. One is on page 4.3, it talks about improving the municipal technology to better serve our city as part of the ROC 2034 strategy and the customer service angle of IT. To me, one of the things that I've heard about, and I know President Scott and I have been in plenty of meetings about this over the years, have been citizens, residents, neighborhood groups asking for, instead of the postcards that go out for different zoning hearings and preservation board, having some type of opt-in or opt-out technology mechanism where someone can get an email or some type of electronic alert saying that there's a hearing coming. Has that been something you've looked at all since you've started here?
Councilmember Gruber, in fact, we're actively pursuing that today. So one of the sort of major initiatives or sort of semi-major initiatives that my team is engaged in is trying to consolidate all of the citizen-related contact information. Today, as you probably know, we have a sort of wide variety of systems that maintain citizen information. And so we're trying to build a self-service portal where citizens can come in, register themselves, have credentials, and maintain their own contact information. Today, it's difficult for us because there are so many different systems that maintain citizen information. We're trying to create a system of record. And so that is actively underway today.
So do you think, is it safe to say that sometime in the next, I'm assuming these things are not quick, but sometime in the next year or so, there will be an opportunity. And just to make sure you know what I'm referring to, you know, I live in the Susan B. Anthony neighborhood, which is a historic district. So every time there's something within 500 feet that has to do with the preservation board, I get a postcard. And very oftentimes the postcards get lost. The postcards are obviously a little bit archaic at this point. Will there be do you imagine a time where that postcard ends, or that postcard is at least complemented by an electronic update?
I do. You know, there's a lot of cities. The city that I came from in Texas sustained a system called Blackboard Connect, and Blackboard Connect was exactly that. Citizens can come in, they can register themselves, they can opt in or out for various types of announcements or notifications. We think we can do it better, and we think we can do it cheaper with systems that we already have. And so our goal is to have that within a year. And so my team is actively pursuing that and has been for the last 2 or 3 months.
That's great. I would just, I would ask to just keep council updated. This is something we hear about from neighborhood groups all the time, and it'd be great as you begin to plan this to have a work session on it at some point over the course of the year. My other question is specifically related to, and thank you for that. My other question is specifically related to records management. I don't know if you know this, Director Gautier, but well before running for office was a twinkle in my eye. I was a historian who used to use the archives over on Andrews regularly. It was a huge part of my ability to do any type of original historical research. And I think it's a great asset that we have as a city. And I'm a little bit concerned about the removal of a records management officer or coordinator from the department. I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about the vision for that function.
Yeah, really, you know, there's been a shift. And so, as you know, records are becoming digital. The current sort of strategy in records management, I think, is a little bit of a dated one. They still maintain microfilm. They still maintain some of these older technologies. What we need to move that technology into a more sort of prevalent sort of state-of-the-art system where we can quickly find that information, archive record, provide some kind of digital records management for the ability to find that data. What you'll find today at the records management office is that most of the records over there are still paper-based, although they transfer them to digital, then they then subsequently transfer them to film. we've sort of started a shift towards paper-based, film-based records management to digital records management. And so that shift just requires a different skill set, a different background and expertise, and that's what we're pursuing.
I'd like to understand a little bit more about this, and I'm sure there's probably some further conversation to have. What I will say, again, this is mostly speaking from personal experience working with our records management office, is that down there on Andrews, I know that the person there has brought in. I remember, I think it was my first year on council, must have been 2018, brought in hundreds of thousands of dollars in grants to be able to work, I think, on those very subjects. Mm-hmm. So I understand the idea of needing to update and regularly improve what we have at the archives. What I don't understand is how we do that by divesting in the position.
Yeah, really, I don't think it's a divestiture in the role, in the position. It's a shift in the strategy and the skill set and the sort of expertise, where we've been moving the entire organization towards more standardization around the way we manage data. Digital records keeping requires an understanding and concepts around metadata management and workflow management, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's really a shift as opposed to a divestiture.
But don't we as a city have to have, isn't it statutory that we have to have a records management officer?
It is.
So what happens here?
So we are actively seeking a records manager today with the skills that we have. And Hazel is actually the records manager, the statutory records manager for the city, as I recall.
So on 4.9, it says that records management coordinator budgeted in 1920, not budgeted in 2021. So you are looking to fill that position, or you're not looking to fill that position?
Not that particular position, a new position with the skill set and the background that we're looking for.
Okay.
So basically, I'm sorry to interrupt, Councilmember. Basically, what Albert is stating is that he wants to hire someone that can do that role, but also can do more than just the records management. By law, the city clerk is the records manager. So we fulfill the statutory requirement by having a city clerk who's the records, who's the statutory requirement for the records manager. However, when it comes down to a position, he is changing the current records management position to fulfill a larger role that will include records management, but also have some other additional responsibilities besides just the records management portion of it.
Thanks. So can you, Director Gauthier, can you tell me on the actual, on 4.9, which title is it? Or is that not something, because I see where records management coordinator goes. I understand what you're saying. You have a different vision for records management.
Right.
But where is the increase in a person?
So we have a different position and other positions available that we plan to fill that role with. And so, this was part of the budget reduction that we had agreed to with Chris Wagner, et cetera. And so we have a few other positions. We haven't quite worked out where we're going to put that role yet, or what that the title is going to be, but we do have a position available for it. And the plan is.
Thank you for your answer. I guess there's probably more conversation about that. I would just say that, again, biased as a historian here, records management is something that I really believe our city needs to be invested in. It sounds like you agree. It sounds like Mayor Warren agrees. I would say that right now we are in the middle of, I really believe we're in the middle of a moment that is we're at a watershed moment in our nation's history. It's this, if anything convinces us that we need to have proper records management, it is what's going on right now, because we need to be able to record what's happening. We need to have a sense of how future generations can look at what's happening. And I don't want to walk away from this budget feeling like we are divesting in records management. And at this point, I understand what you're saying, Director, but at this point, based on what I'm looking at 4.9, that's certainly how it appears.
Yeah, I would say we do have, I feel the same way you do, that we are at a watershed moment and that we need to sort of invest heavily in records management. And, anybody who talks to my team knows that that is now a number one priority.
I want to reiterate that we definitely agree with you, Councilmember Gruber. We're not divesting in records management. We're actually expanding records management to be able to include other responsibilities that would have us be able to document and pull up records easier and better. And we are in compliance with the law that requires that we have a record manager.
Thanks.
Okay, Councilmember Lupian, did you have a question on this, on information technology?
I did.
Okay.
So in the capital improvement plan, it says that due to budget constraints, there's 150,000 coming out of information security. I'm just wondering if you can speak to that. Yeah, what are the reductions? How will that impact us?
So we had, the capital improvement plan had us replacing some of our equipment. We decided just to postpone those upgrades. The current equipment will reach end of life. So we had planned to replace some of that equipment and put it in earlier than required. But we're going to postpone some of that, and the risk to the city is inconsequential.
I also had a question about Office 365. I think I can speak for a lot of us that I really appreciate the upgrade, but just wondering, what is the total impact that will on the budget? Because it's a subscription service, right? So how much do we pay every year?
So at the moment, the way we funded Office 365 was by eliminating some of our other expenses. We had some expenses that we paid out to Gartner, and the current expenditure is about $9 a month per license. So we have about 230 licenses. A lot of those licenses were purchased as part of the pandemic funding. We bought them because as a response to the COVID-19 funding. Moving forward, the idea is to replace a lot of the existing expenses. So we have endpoint protection, we have some archiving, our email archiving solution. So again, it's really a shift. Office 365 is more of a consolidated platform that allows us to get rid of things like Slack, get rid of things like our email archiving, our endpoint protection. So it's really a shift. And over the next three and a half years, we expect Office 365 to save the city money, not cost.
No, that's great news. I think Jackie, you put this in the chat. The portal that you're talking about, will that also incorporate the work that NBD is doing?
Right. So we're working with NBD right now and Gary's team on the portal. So to be honest with you, there's multiple initiatives. Munis has a portal for citizens. The permitting and land management, most of the solutions that are being proposed for permitting and land management have a citizen engagement portal as well. What we're trying to do is make sure we're not reinventing the wheel and that we're complementing those systems and not overlapping them.
So will there be a single sign-on, or will a resident have to sign up for each one?
We will do everything in our power to enable single sign-on like we have today. Again, that's the other area where Office 365 comes in, is Office 365 provides a portal for which we can authenticate to all of those other systems.
That is great. Just another follow-up on that. One of kind of my, and this is just my personal passion, is around allowing a citizen to sign up for updates around legislation. So if they're interested in public safety, they would get a notification, you know, when there was legislation for that. And is that something that's possible with this portal?
Absolutely. So, excuse me. So as I mentioned, many cities enable tools like Blackboard Connect. We think we can do it cheaper, better, and more effectively, and actually offer a better service. And so that's the kind of, you know, lots of people, we own Laserfish, for example. Laserfish has a citizen portal as well. It's not very sexy and it's not very functional. So we just think we can do a lot better, and that's exactly the path we're headed down.
All right, that's exciting. Final question. The website, and I believe that's managed through communication, but do you have kind of an idea of what it would take to make our website more, right now the search capacity is really limited. And do you have ideas on how we can make that better?
So one of the things that you're going to see soon, I hope, within the next month and a half or 2 months, is a replacement of the internal employee portal, e-portal. And so we've been moving a lot of that to SharePoint. One of the reasons that we've been doing that is because it tightly integrates with GIS and it provides a much more robust search capability. Our goal is to, once the internal employee portal has been migrated, to do the same thing for the external portal, to work with communications and to sort of build that system out. What you'll notice is on the internal e-portal, it is a radical change, both from a look and feel and customer experience point of view, as well as from a functional point of view. And again, that's something that Office 365 has brought to the table with no cost to the city, no additional cost to the city.
That's incredible. Thank you so much. I think, you know, we can all say that we're really benefiting from having you here. The website is one of the #1 complaints I have from people just trying to find information. And I know, you know, it's a value of all of ours to make government more transparent. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And we're joined by Councilmember Harris. Let the record reflect that Councilmember Harris has now joined us. Other questions on section 4, the IT section of the budget? Any other questions? Okay. Here, hearing no other questions, we'll take a brief pause and we'll reconvene exactly at 10:20 to move into the finance section of the budget. So feel free to refresh your coffee cups, take a stretch, and we'll reconvene at 10:20. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. I appreciate your time.
Morning, Constance. This is BJ talking. Just wanted to make sure that you knew that we will reconvene at 10:20 for the finance hearings and that folks are taking a brief break until.
Done, and then, you know, it's
BJ,
coming,
you're
but-
not on mute.
Oh, I know, I was talking to Constance, so she just joined the call.
Okay. All right.
What?
Director Brooks Harris, are you there?
Yes, I am.
I have LaQuanda McCullough trying to join the call, but I don't have her on my list, I think. Should I have her join?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. So LaQuanda will be joining. She's the new MWBE.
Okay. I just didn't have her on my invite
Sorry
list.
about that. And Enza from
Director Brooks Harris, are you there?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
I have LaQuanda McCullough trying to join the call, but I don't have her on my list, I think. Should I have her join?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. So LaQuanda will be joining. She's the new BE.
Okay. I
Hello, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes, good morning.
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry.
We're in recess till about 10:20.
Thank you.
But so everyone knows, we are still live streaming. So if you want to place your camera.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
We'll get started in about 6 minutes for all the folks that just joined from finance. Okay, folks, welcome back. We're going to get ready to start the finance portion of this budget hearing. It's 10:20. We have Director Brooks Harris from the Finance Department. And Director Harris, I'd like to give you the opportunity to introduce your team, and then we'll get right into the presentation. If those who are not speaking can please mute their phones. Of this budget hearing, 10:20. We have Director.
Sorry, I believe Director Harris, you might have the YouTube video up, which is why there's a slight delay coming from your screen. So if you were to close that, then we wouldn't have that feedback.
We have.
I am hearing a lot of feedback and I'm hearing what has already been said.
Sorry, I believe you might have the YouTube video up, which is why there's a slight delay coming from your screen. So if you were to close that, then we wouldn't have that feedback.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay?
Now I can hear you, Director Harris.
I am hearing a lot of feedback and I'm hearing already been said. So am I.
Sorry, I believe you might have the YouTube video up.
Oh,
There's a slight delay.
Director Harris, I think that you have to go back out and get on a different link. There's a separate link that you have to click on. BJ, can you send her the link to this so that you have to close everything out and then come back in on a separate link?
Okay,
BJ, you're on mute.
Sorry. I can resend this link, but what I think is happening, because the feedback is coming from Director Brooks Harris's screen, were you by chance watching the hearings on YouTube beforehand? If you were, you might have the YouTube window still open. If that's the case and your sound is on, then you might be, then I would try leaving this meeting and then just rejoining with the link that was originally sent.
I closed the.
All right, let's take 30 seconds. Let's take 30 seconds and we can make sure that Director Harris is able to get on without the feedback. So let's just take a 30-second pause. And BJ, if you could just make sure she has the link, then we can reconvene in 30 seconds to a minute. Okay, Director Harris, how's that? Is that better?
That is much better.
Okay, perfect.
I just got out and went back in, but I had already.
No, that's okay. It happens. We're all working through this this phase of technology, so I want to thank everyone for their patience, and thank you, Director Harris, Brooks Harris, for you and your team to join us. Before we get started, if it's okay, I will have you say anything that you might want to say, but more importantly, to introduce your team that you have with us, and then we'll get right into questions in this budget section of finance.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and introduce my team. From accounting, I have the Deputy Director of Finance / Director of Accounting, Kathy Havens. I have Tim Hurley, the Assistant Director of Accounting. Kim Jones, the City Treasurer. John Fornoff, the Deputy Treasurer. Mike Zazzara, the City Assessor. Laura Miller, Director of Parking. Constance Mitchell Jefferson, the Purchasing Agent. LaQuanda McCullough, MWBE Officer. From TVA, Sherry Walker Cowart, Executive Director, Dr. Leslie Smith, Assistant Executive Director. That is my team.
Thank you very much. And colleagues, we'll proceed with this section as we have with others, being that this section is a little longer and encompasses various areas. We'll start with questions related to the Director's Office, Accounting and Treasury, which is sections 5.6 through 5.17 of the budget. Again, 5.6 through 5.17 covers the Director's Office, Accounting and Treasury. Questions on that section?
I have questions, Councilmember, but now I'm not sure what section they're in, so I'm gonna have to pause them for a second.
I got a question.
Okay, Councilmember Patterson, go ahead.
All right, 5.6 through 5.17 is where we're at. I would like to direct your attention to page 514, where we are looking at city-initiated foreclosures. We're looking at a significant, coming down the chart here, key performance indicators. So 1819, 1,048, projected for this year, 3,000. Can you talk a little bit about what we're doing different and who we're looking to foreclose on?
So go ahead, Kim.
Okay, so Councilmember Patterson, the reason that number has increased is because we are no longer selling our tax liens. We have put quite a few properties, quite a few properties will be put in the upcoming foreclosure action. We decided that we were not going to sell any more tax liens. So that's basically what's causing the increase.
Okay, so if memory serves me correctly, before when we were selling tax liens, those were owner-occupied properties, is that correct?
That's correct.
So are we now going to be looking to foreclose on owner-occupied properties?
Yes, we are, but we are going to take a greater approach at outreach. So we're going to work with the Neighborhood and Business Development Department to try to get those property owners to apply for tax agreements, work with the law department on any type of programs that those property owners might be eligible for as it relates to perhaps some additional financial assistance or financial guidance. So we are increasing our outreach efforts as it relates to foreclosure of owner-occupied properties.
Okay, so I have to be honest. I appreciate the honesty of your answer, but I find it terrifying. Let me tell you why. When we were selling tax liens, what ended up happening is that you had the new lien holder, they would do the outreach. Some folks would pay, some people wouldn't pay. People would work through it and it kind of worked. Some instances given where the property was, and because I've gotten phone calls about it from across the city over my time in office, something would happen and you didn't pay that lien holder and they ended up selling your house. And somebody would come and knock on the door and they would be like, so look, here's the deal, player. I own your house now because we foreclosed on you and you got a choice. You can stay or you can go and we'll give you a little time to think about it. We'll come back and talk to you. That's horrible, but the notion that the city could well possibly be the person selling the lien for the property owner, that's for the owner occupied property, is extremely frightening. So, I mean, when we're saying we're going to sell these, I guess my next question is there going to be somebody's job to go out and knock on Miss Minnie's door and talk to her directly and say, ma'am, you behind and we need to make a deal?
I think that's Councilmember, that is exactly what the city treasurer just stated, that they are going to work aggressively with the Neighborhood and Business Development Department and work very, very hard to get anyone that is in jeopardy of losing their home the ability to get in a tax lien agreement. As you know, for many years, the selling of tax liens has been something that, especially, I know that this is near and dear to Councilmember Ortiz's heart, that we no longer sell tax liens. And so we have worked aggressively as a city to figure out a way to work with our residents to make sure that they are able to stay in their homes, but we develop a policy by which they can make a tax agreement, pay on that tax agreement, and not be in jeopardy of losing their homes. This is something that we have worked very hard on for a number of years to come to this point where we will no longer be selling tax liens, but we have to make sure that we treat all of our taxpayers equally across the board. And that is our goal, to treat everyone the same and to work aggressively to help people that need help remain in their homes as long as possible through the tax agreements.
Well, Madam Mayor, I appreciate that answer, but the question part of the question I was asking was, is it going to be somebody's job to go and knock on the door? Because, you know.
Well, that's what I said. Yes, it is going to be somebody's job. We're going to work with the Neighborhood and Development Department, the offices of the neighborhood service centers, to go and knock on doors, to write letters, to comply with making sure that people understand that they have the ability to do a tax lien and remain in their home.
All right.
To do a tax agreement and remain in their home.
So I guess now everybody gets to get on this one. I'm gonna sit down for it.
Okay. Councilmember Gruber, you had something on 5.6 to 5.17?
Yeah, I did. And I also just want to finish that conversation. Huge thank you to Mayor Warren, Kim, Director Brooks Harris, everyone else who were involved. Jackie, Councilmember Ortiz, VP Lightfoot, and myself had organized a small little subcommittee specifically because we really believe that when it comes to selling tax liens, the most important thing is, and Jackie and Willie, I'm not trying to speak for you, but I think we all agreed the most important thing was for us to sell those liens to a company who does not give a damn about the city of Rochester or its taxpayers is a whole lot worse than having the compassionate members of Mayor Warren's administration responsible for making sure people are able to pay. So I think it's the right thing to do. I'm thrilled that we were able to get it done so quickly, and I think it was a great collaboration. My question is specifically related to the tax agreement. I think the tax agreement itself is it's underutilized. So I've already heard one answer from Kim about working with the neighborhood service centers, and that makes a ton of sense. I want to understand in terms of the tax agreement, how much discretion do we have to tailor it to the individual cases?
So the way currently the tax agreement process works is we can afford someone up to 5 years to repay the delinquencies. There's a monthly tax agreement payment that has to be made every month. In addition to those taxes that are not covered under the agreement, they need to be kept current. So what people do, they'll make their monthly payment, and then when their installments aren't covered under the agreement become due, they try to stay on top of those installments. Now, oftentimes people do fall behind. So what we'll do is we'll renegotiate the agreement for the remaining term of the 5 years. So let's say somebody's, a year into a 5-year agreement, they fall behind, they can't stay on top of the monthly installments or the installments that aren't covered under the agreement. We'll then take those installments and recast the agreement again for an additional 4 years. So we afford them a generous amount of time to repay, again, up to 5 years. So I mean,
So-
it works pretty well.
Yeah, that's great. So Kim, will you and your team be kind of training Director Algarin and her team on how to start these conversations out of the neighborhood service centers?
Yes, so actually Commissioner Meyer and I have been working together. We are actually going to be working with the neighborhood service to kind of put the agreements in place there at the service center where people can actually pick up an agreement there. We've actually put them online now. So we are actually going to be doing a little more outreach with the neighborhood service centers.
That's great.
Them as well.
And I hope that on top of that, we're able to also make sure there's connections to the Office of Community Wealth Building, specifically as it relates to the financial empowerment centers, because I think it's a great opportunity to do some real tailored counseling with folks.
Yep, that's actually part of our plan as well.
Great. The last question I had on this section was related to the replacement of the mainframe. I assume that is also going to have some major implications for taxpayers to be in terms of the ease of payments and things of that nature. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, so right now we're dealing with a very old mainframe system, both as it relates to taxes, to water, to refuse. They're all proprietary systems. They're very labor intensive, require, a lot of programming when simple changes are requested, a lot of COBOL programming. So what we're, hopefully looking for, and we've been working a lot with Albert and his team to try to get new systems in-house that will, not only be easier for the employees to utilize, but also be easier for customers to do things like go in and, access tax information that, we'll hopefully be able to put on our website, extend the number of years that people are able to go in and view tax information as far as payments being made, things of that nature. But really, the real goal is to kind of make the system a little more user-friendly for the employees to manage. It's a system where, a $251 million tax bill is generated from. And it's an older system that's just becoming very labor intensive, very hard to maintain employees because it's so labor intensive. There's a lot of work involved with managing these systems. So the goal is to hopefully go out and get a system that is a little more user-friendly to both the staffers and the city residents.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Harris and then Vice President Lightfoot.
Hi, I'd like to echo my colleague, Councilmember Mitch Gruber, and his joy in seeing that the city will no longer be offering or selling tax liens. And this is a good thing for our city, and looking forward to this, especially since this is best for the neighbors of our community. I'd like to ask a question, just a clarity question, to see if with the selling of the liens, the discontinuing of selling of the liens, does that include properties that are not owner occupied, commercial properties or any of that?
Yes, it's all properties.
Okay, thank you. Then that will conclude my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Lightfoot.
Thank you, Chairman Evans. I too want to just make a comment and kudos to the mayor and to the administration. And just as a transition or kind of piggyback off of what Councilmember Lachey Harris was just asking a question about whether non-residential units were included in that. I was an example of a commercial property that was significantly in back taxes with the city, working along with a external company that we were selling our tax liens to. And they were very difficult to deal with, predatory lending as far as I'm concerned. And one of the first things I did when I came into city council was to work with Councilmember Ortiz and Gruber. And this was like one of the things that I just felt like we just had to do because I experienced it myself, almost foreclosing on my property trying to do business in, of course, a underserved community, marginalized community. And I want to just say that when I came to Kim Jones, she was patient. She saved my business. And had it not been for her and her patience and her ability to see that, and help me get through that particular tough time, business-wise in the community, I probably would not have been a business, and it would have been a tremendous impact on the Jefferson Avenue community. So I just wanted to say kudos to her and to the administration. And I think this is the perfect path forward, because I know that there were other people like me in the same prediction. It's easier to work with our staff here locally than trying to deal with people from Florida and who knows where else that really don't have a personal connection with the citizens and the business owners within our community. So I just wanted to publicly thank her and thank the mayor and everyone for making this, because I believe this is going to save a lot of businesses, a lot of homes, and right now, especially through the pandemic. The last thing we need to be doing is losing, especially minority-owned businesses within our community. So kudos to you guys, and I'm glad that I was a part of that work group to help push this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Vice President Lightfoot. It was my privilege and honor to assist you.
Councilmember Lupien.
So I have a question about pilots. Would I ask this here or in NBD?
What's the question?
About pilots? Well, a list of pilots that we've given in tax agreements.
Yeah, I think NBD, you can ask that question in NBD.
Okay, so I'll pause that one.
We can get you that. We can get you that list. We have to work with law to get you that list.
Okay, thank you. And kind of attached to that, are they meeting their employment goals? And if for commercial, and if they have revenue impacts? And for shelter rent pilots, what is the total remission ended up being? Those are the questions. The other question I have is about the tax assessment. If we don't know what's going to end up happening with COVID in terms of how it will.
Hold on, just let me stop you for a second, Councilman. Are you talking about sections 518 through 521?
Oh, maybe not. Okay.
Just let me pause there. I'll come right back to you. Let me pause there. Are there any other questions on accounting, treasury, director's office, where we're at right now? Before, if not, we can move on to assessment. But I did see that Councilmember Pio and Ortiz had some comments that they wanted to make, and then yes. I'll move on to the next section, and then you can ask your question about assessments there, Councilmember Lupien. Councilmember Ortiz, and then Pio.
Thank you. I just wanted to, again, really quick on the topic of the tax lanes, and I know that we're taking it house, and I do appreciate that effort. It's been a long haul on here, but I did want to ask again, and I know, Kim, this is very difficult, and I understand due to the mainframe system that we have some severe limitations, but I would like to, again, implore us to take a look at, once again, the opportunity for the interest rates to change. Years ago, we went from 18% down to 12%, and the terms are still the same in terms of, 10% down, the rest spread over 5 years. But if our goal for homeowners is truly to have them stay in their homes and have them be able to repay their tax debt, I really think that we should look into additional options as far as perhaps a shorter time frame with less interest. So the faster you pay it off, the less interest you pay, or something of that nature. Because again, at the end of the day, when we can provide loans to folks at 1 to 3% interest, I really do think that we should have the opportunity to change that 12% even further, especially if someone can pay things off perhaps even a little sooner. So whatever we can do from a technology standpoint to update our mainframe system to allow us to do this, I really, really implore us to take a look at that.
Thank you. Councilmember Pio.
Yes, thank you. I have a couple of quick questions concerning the delinquent tax accounts. I see that there's no increase between 2019 and 2020 budgets. are we not expecting an increase in delinquent tax accounts due to COVID?
Well, when we budgeted, when we did the initial budget, we did not. This information was prepared prior to the COVID outbreak.
Okay.
So I mean, it's basically a projection. So the actual number will probably be somewhat different.
Understand. So what would that number, the 9,900, equate to in estimated dollar amounts?
I don't know that number off the top of my head. I can try to get an estimate to you of what that probably would equate to. Generally, though, what we do is we bill approximately $25 million of delinquencies every year on the tax bill, anywhere from $25 to $27 million every year. So that might give you a good estimate of the delinquencies.
Okay, and out of that 25 million, how much is attributed to businesses versus residents?
I could get you that breakdown. I don't know it off the top of my head.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilman, in terms of delinquent revenue, this is Chris. I just wanted to jump in. If you look at 1-18 in the budget, you'll see on the revenue section, you'll see revenue projections around budgeted amounts around delinquent supplemental taxes. So for 2021, our estimated increase there is about $500,000 over the 1920 budget, but it's about $1.5 million higher than our current year estimates for collections.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner.
Thank you. Before I move on to the next section, Councilmember Patterson, anything you wanted to add on 516 through 517?
Yep, just a point of clarification. I am not opposed to the city bringing this process back in-house. I just wanted to make sure that we were going to do everything we could to reach out to our residents, because foreclosure is a rough step. And as much as we can do to avoid it, especially with it being a owner-occupied property, I just feel we need to do that. So I was happy to get that clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Section 518 through 521 is assessment. Councilmember Lupien said that's her favorite section of the budget. So I'll let her start with her question. Councilmember Lupien, you had questions around assessment?
I do. So as I was saying, we don't really know what things are, how this is going to play out in terms of property values in relation to the COVID crisis. If the assessments end up decreasing because of it, will the current assessment that was done before COVID stand for the next 4 years?
No, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. No, what we do generally when it's not a reassessment year, if somebody calls up and inquires about their assessment, we will go out and review that assessment individually. Now, if we see a big decrease across the board in all the neighborhoods, then certainly we will consider doing an interim reassessment on all the properties.
Okay. What level would trigger that? What amount of decrease?
I really don't. I haven't considered it yet. The reports
yeah, it's probably not a likely scenario.
No. With homes typically taking 45 to 90 days to close, we really won't know what the results are until another 3 to 6 months from now, as far as COVID. But speaking to real estate brokers, appraisers, people that are on the Board of Assessment Review, they're still out there showing houses, and there's multiple offers. They're still writing offers for $10,000 more than the asking price, and multiple offers on properties. So I don't think we'll see a big decrease or in value, but fewer sales. So even with since the start of COVID, the number of deed transfers that we process on a daily basis, a typical day was anywhere from 20 to 30 deeds, not all sales, but maybe just some name transfers and whatnot. We dipped down in April to 10 to 15 a day, but within the last 3 to 4 weeks, we've seen those numbers come back up to, anywhere from 20 to 30. So it's coming back, it's back to normal, pretty much.
Thanks for that answer.
Thank you, President Scott, and then Councilmember Gruber.
Yes, can you tell me what the comprehensive review of not-for-profits consists of?
Yeah, what we do, every 4 years we do this, and it's usually the year after a reassessment. We send out renewals every year, but we don't get the renewals back, not 100%. So, and we haven't taken the exemptions off. I mean, if it's obviously a religious property that we know is being used, we kind of let the renewal go. But we will go out and we will check everything charitable, religious, and oftentimes we found that properties have been leased to for-profit entities and really aren't entitled to the exemption anymore. Lack of use on some of these properties, they're just sitting. We check water consumption, and if an assessment, we'll put the property back on the tax roll, but we will also review the assessment. If something is vacant and boarded and not in use, we'll definitely reduce the assessment, but we'll put it back on the tax roll.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Councilmember Gruber, questions on assessment, and then I want to move on to parking.
Yeah, thanks. I actually had President Scott's question as well, so I'm appreciative. I just want to, I want to ask one quick thing though. And I want to also say I appreciate the Office of the Assessor and how customer service focused you all were last year, and there were a lot of questions about the assessment. I heard nothing but wonderful things, so thank you there.
Oh,
Can I get after this in writing, can we get just a breakdown? I'd love to see the increase in assessed value is really significant. I think it was obviously a reflection of a fairly booming economy and hot housing market. Can we just get comps from the last 3 or 4 times we went out and did a reassessment of just how significant of a change there was?
Yeah, I actually I do have stats from the 2012 and 2016 reassessment. I have those. I might have distributed it as well to City Council.
If you could just resubmit those, I think it'd be great. Thank you so much.
Not a problem.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to parking. Let's move on to parking, please.
I actually have one, if that's okay. I have an extra one.
Yeah, quickly. Yeah, go ahead.
So you mentioned being able to monitor water usage rate to kind of see if a building is being utilized. Are you able to do that by unit, or is that just per building?
Well, it depends on how many water meters are connected to a building. It depends on the type of building. Typically, there's just one, sometimes there's 2.
So for an apartment building, there wouldn't be per unit water usage?
No, not usually.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're gonna move on to parking. I have just a broad question about parking, and this might be for the mayor. I know we've tried to get out of the. I'm not a fan of parking garages. It was my hope that we would be able to get rid of most of them because I know they're extremely expensive. I was in favor of getting a couple of years ago. I know it didn't pass council, but of a couple of other garages that didn't go through. So, Mayor, what's your view on that? There's so many views on whether or not the city should own more parking garages, own less parking garages. Should we get out of it, try to unload the parking business because of the costs? What do you think?
So as council knows, we had at a couple times tried to sell our parking garages. A couple of those deals have, one was rejected by council. The other 2 we were not able to close on as of yet. One, a partnership, basically dissolved, and therefore they were not able to purchase the parking garage. And then we are still in the process, especially with the crossroads, given the fact that we are going to be doing significant work to the parking garage as well as the Charles Carroll's Park. We were not able to get that one to close, but the buyer is still very much interested. And so we're talking about that, and we would of course come back to council when it's time. But we have been working with the downtown businesses to talk about different and reimagining parking and what that looks like for the future. And they have RDDC basically they have a consultant that they brought on board to look at parking across the board. But part of it is that many people are looking at not necessarily driving anymore, especially our millennials. They are riding bikes and, utilizing hopefully in the future scooters and ride share programs as well as car share. So at this point in time, we are thinking about ways that we can prepare our city for the future and what's yet to come, but working with our community partners to figure out the best way to make our parking something that is of value to the community, but also take into account the maintenance that's required for parking garages. As we all know, the parking garages, the upkeep and the capital cost on them are very expensive, and we're going to continue to maintain those and work diligently with our parking director to equalize the system. Sometimes as you look across the spectrum, there's different agreements that have been made over decades as it pertains to parking that we are taking into account as well. And the changing environment in downtown Rochester with residential units coming online also is changing the nature of our parking and what we offer. So this is a comprehensive sort of plan and approach that has to be taken in order to ensure that we are responding to the needs of the entire community. It's not something that the city is doing in a silo, something that we're working with our community partners to do.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Vice President Lightfoot, you had a question on parking.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman Evans. My question is about 524. This is a program change. It's also new to the budget. And of course, as we're talking about the parking access, the installation and implementation of the new parking access revenue control system software, Washington Square Garage and South Avenue Garage. Could you please just, explain that, please?
Yes, council member. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. Thank you. The revenue control equipment is comprised of the actual gates in each garage and then the backroom software that runs the gates, as well as the desktop software here in our offices where we're issuing parking passes, gate passes, special event permits, validations, and generating invoices and collecting payments and applying payments. The systems throughout the garages had been seriously outdated, and we began several years ago methodically updating the equipment and the software that operate these garages. And the outdated software, being so archaic, didn't allow for online management of a customer's account. They were unable to log in and select the level of parking they would like to have, or view their invoices or pay their invoices electronically or online. They could only get a paper invoice from our office and send a check. Now the new software and the new equipment allows for greater flexibility in customers for their management of their own accounts.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Harris?
Vice President Lightfoot asked my question, so thank you. And it has
okay, thank you. Councilmember Lupien and then Gruber on parking, and I'm going to move on to purchasing. Councilmember Lupien.
So my question is on the parking garages, and just for my information, if we're not able to operate the garages at a profit, how would someone buying them from us do it? My concern is, are they going to lower the pay of the people working there or defer needed maintenance? Just wondering if you guys had an idea.
Oftentimes, the members of the private sector are able to procure construction and other services at less expensive costs than the public sector.
Is that due to labor requirements?
I'm sorry.
Why would, I'm wondering why that is. Is it due to, you know, restrictions on having to use you know, like labor unions contracts or?
Yeah, we have, our expenses include levels of pay that we require our vendors to offer their employees. So we want to maintain a certain level of income for people, and the private sector tend not to follow our minimum wage requirements. And they can also procure construction contractors a lot less expensive than the city does, frankly.
So by selling the garages, we end up unfortunately having the workers get paid less. Is that a potential?
No, not necessarily. What the parking director is saying is that the private market has a different pay scale and requirement than the city has when it comes down to capital improvements. And so that doesn't necessarily, you know, as in, you know, materials, labor, all of those things would be factored into that. However, at this point in time, you know, only one garage out of all the ones that we own is still up in the air as it pertains to selling. So it's actually a moot point at this time.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Gruber, parking.
Yep. Just a couple quick questions. Do we have a sense there of when we're going to plan of when the plan is to reinstate parking fees? You know, and frankly, I should also say thank you for waiving those fees for folks during COVID.
So now that the community is opening back up and businesses are starting to open back up their offices, we would most likely reinstate those at July 1st.
Okay, that makes sense. I hope there's a real strong push from communications just to make sure folks know that's coming. Hope we get a media blast on it, because I can already imagine a lot of folks not being prepared for that. Just two other quick things. The 70,000 in contingency on 523 for the Crossroads garage. Is it fair to read that basically we're decreasing utilities by the same amount we're adding contingency funds, mostly because we know we don't need to spend that on utilities, and there is a chance we need it on security there?
So the heat, light, and power, the utilities decrease is heat, light, and power for all garages, and that's just based on historical actuals. So we felt that we could decrease that line, so it's not tied to Crossroads.
Okay.
Increase out of that 70,000 increase for Crossroads, about 42,000 is contingency in the event that revenue control equipment would fail at the garage, and then have a cashier there.
So if that money is not used, if that contingency is not used, it's going to go into general fund?
It would go into parking fund balance at year end.
Okay, and thank you. My last question is really about the increase in a parking enforcement person, or is that actually in Director Walker Cowart's section?
That's in the parking bureau. We've eliminated 2 part-time positions in order to fund a full-time parking enforcement officer. We cover 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. 6 days a week, and the added position will help us more evenly cover evening and weekend hours using full-time rather than part-time employees.
Great. I just want to make one comment about that. Obviously, a lot of us on council were very familiar with the pizza place over by the Gantt Center and all the issues there with double parking. And we brought this up several times, that there's so many parts of our city that there's consistent double parking. I always talk about Main and Jefferson, right by the flower shop there. There is regular double parking in a way that is very, very dangerous. I would just hope that as we add resources into this, which is something I would absolutely endorse and support, that we do make sure there's targeted staffing at areas where we know there's real danger and real public safety hazards related to double parking. And that includes parking in bike lanes where we know there's a high traffic of bicyclists as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and Councilman Lupin, you asked are parking fees on the credit report? No, they're not. Parking fees don't go on the credit report. We're going to move on to purchasing, sections 527 through 531. Questions on purchasing. I believe Councilman Ortiz had a question on purchasing.
Yep. So I have 2 quick questions. The first is on the number of goods and service contracts that are awarded. It's about 500 or so. Was curious as to what percentage of those have gone historically to city-owned businesses, if we have a sense for what that looks like for us.
I can get back to you with that. I don't particularly have that number right now broken down by city versus non-city.
Okay, yeah, that would be helpful. Would love to get that. And then my other question is, if we can get an update on when someone fills out that vendor form online to submit, what areas of expertise they have. And I know that BidNet is, the preferred system in terms of getting information on contracts or what have you. But what communication, once you fill out that vendor form, is there a then response electronically or a phone call follow-up to then introduce them to the other tools and resources? How does, can you just refresh my memory? How exactly does that happen?
So when someone goes online and applies to be a vendor with the city of Rochester, we receive that in our office. We have a young lady that does the responses to that. She then will get in contact with that company and let them know that they need to provide us with a W-9. And they also need to provide us with any other information that they didn't include, like if there is a different mailing address, is, for them, is that particularly the name of the company that is not listed on their W-9. They might say we're Constance Jefferson Incorporated instead of Constance Jefferson Associates. So we want to make sure that everything that we have in the system is correct. And then with BidNet, how it works is that is particularly not necessarily for our vendors, but public as well. So BidNet is a totally different system, and we become a part of the Empire Purchasing Group with that. And those questions, that information that's in their vendor system is quite different than our vendor system.
And is there usually no crossover though? Because I feel like people who do, construction related type things may tend to, when they're going on the site, may have filled out the vendor, not realizing that they really needed to go. And I'm obviously talking about smaller organizations. I know that many of them are savvy enough to go to the contract section, but for those who make the mistake of going to the vendor page first, are they redirected over to where is more appropriate for their type of work?
Yes, if they link into the purchasing page, it will allow them to not only link into the purchasing of the other purchasing areas, whether that be commodities, goods and services, or whether that be public works contracts. There's a link on there that'll say for more information on public works contracting, click here or whatever. There's those links as well.
And sorry, thank you. And one last question. Have we made any progress in connecting ourselves when it comes to MWBE and city businesses with the NBD home rehab programs? Have we made any progress there?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Because for my line, you got cut off.
Yeah, there was work where we were trying to make progress on connecting the NBD rehab listings, if you will, of companies that work on those projects. And we were, last I knew, we were trying to make progress in connecting them to your MWB effort and listings so that we were kind of working from the same inventory of folks. Have we made any progress on making those connections?
Yes, there has been some connection between myself and Johanna from the rehab side. They also, now rehab also has an MWBE criteria
they have received from the state as well. So a lot of the firms that are on the list are now inclusive of MWBE firms as well as non-MWBE firms. So homeowners pretty much have a choice when you're choosing those businesses they want to work with.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Vice President Lightfoot, you had a question on purchasing?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Evans. Our staff does a significant review of the budget, and they oftentimes come up with some very good questions. So I would be remiss if I did not ask some of the questions from the hard work of our staff. In the 528, what accounts for the increase of the $10,000 in budget 2020 to 21 from budget 2019 to 20 under the construction? It shows 000 key performance indicator.
Correct. So this is the increase from 50 million to 60 million, and that being that most of that was Rock the River money that we received in, which is pushing up, and the fact that we chose to change our bidding processes for these contracts so that we would be able to take advantage of the marketplace when no one else was pretty much doing bidding. And that was bidding a lot of this out in the fall, as opposed to waiting till the spring construction season. So that increased not only the construction piece, but it's also going to be increasing the number of MWBE businesses that can take advantage of these opportunities as well.
Thank you, Ms. Jefferson.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Pio and then President Scott.
Yes, on the same area there, it says the percent of city public bids received electronically is only going to be 30%. How do we increase that so that we can do better for our environment?
Right now, the number of contracts that we are receiving are 100% for all of our public works construction contracts and 100% for all of our commodity goods and services contracts. Because the city does do a lot of different contracting, like through RFPs and everything, we will never see 100%, but I do believe that we will kind of be able to average, I would even say like around 30 to 40% in the future. We have just begun to include RFPs on our electronic bidding process, and we give departments the ability to choose whether or not they want to use the electronic site. Sometimes in the marketplace, there are a lot of businesses that you can solicit from, and by going on BidNet, it really pushes the number of responses that you can get to a point where it's not manageable once they get the information in-house and have to start reviewing it. But then there are other RFPs that can take advantage of BidNet and use the broader marketplace.
Okay, because under learning and innovation, they're at 95%. I mean, that are distributed electronically. It just seems that we could probably increase that, but underneath that's percent of purchases of best value bids. So we're only 2% of all purchases are best value, meaning that's the lowest price.
So what best value is best value allows us to choose a minority candidate over a non-minority candidate, provided that they come in within 5% of the lowest bidding price. And we also include not only commodity goods and services in this area, but we also include co-op contracting. The city has also been able to take advantage of a lot more co-op contracts. So a co-op contract might be with the state of New York, where they will have a list of minority businesses that we can choose from to give the business to, as opposed to a non-minority firm. So I would say this number could go up and down depending upon the amount of contracts that we're looking to bid out and whether or not we're utilizing co-op contracts or not.
So how can we increase that then? 'Cause to me, 2% is super low and we really can't go any, I mean, we can go worse, but I'd hate to see that. How do you see that we can increase that?
I think that to look at this number by itself is kind of deceiving. If you look at what is being done across the board with MWBE, this is just one area where we can increase to work with minority businesses. It is not the only area where we are increasing to work with minority businesses.
And just as a personal side, I would love to see the same breakdown for veteran-owned businesses, please.
Yes.
I know you don't have the answer right now.
There has been some discussion around this from the state level right now because our MWBE program is predicated on Article 15A. There is no mandate from the state of New York right now for utilizing veteran-owned businesses, but that is one of the areas that we are looking into. The new MWBE officer and I are looking into because we're starting to see a lot more of our grants coming in with SDVOB goals on it, and that is 6%. So with the fact that we are now seeing that, and we actually, when you all receive from me, probably the end of next month, the goals for the complete MWBE report for the year, you will see that SDVOB is something that we are counting now in our numbers.
Excellent. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. President Scott, and then I'm going to move on to the last section.
Just real quickly, before you move on, Chairman, I just want to know SBDO. Can you tell me what does that mean?
Yes. So SDVOB means Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Business.
President Scott, last section. I mean, purchasing, and then we'll move on after you.
Constance, can you tell me how have you been doing with the work that you had started, the great work to try and help increase the number of the certifications for MWBEs?
It's been very difficult to work with the numbers of increases in the upstate New York area. It is still a challenge. Myself and my colleagues in Buffalo and Syracuse, we try to have conversations at least quarterly to get together and talk about, what are we doing? How are we doing it? But because the system in New York State is broken, and because we have found that a lot of the fast track components, we had talked about one time doing a fast track program, but after looking really closely at what the state was doing in terms of fast track, I kind of backed away from it because I didn't think it was going to be good for us to spend the time, energy, effort, and monies, quite frankly, to establish a program where the state wasn't even honoring the current fast track programs they had. So with that said, I have in the last, I would say 6 months, seen some progress being made with upstate New York firms being certified. And as I was looking at our numbers in our directory recently, this is the first time in like 2 years that our MBEs exceed the number of WBEs that we have. And I was really excited about that. We've also seen the number go up from like 400, from like 300 and something to almost 500 and something. So that wasn't, to me was a good indication that slowly but surely the state is starting to come around with certification. And as far as our numbers and where we go, this year alone, pre 2018-54 ordinance, we were doing about $6 million a year with MWBEs. I'm proud to say that this year we're almost at 20 million.
Wow, that is great.
And yeah, to President Scott's point, I remember when back in the day, I came to a bunch of sessions that Constance, I know that was your baby, getting those MWB and get those MWB certifications increased. So I'm glad to see that it still continues. I know you are very passionate about that. So
yes, definitely.
We'll move on to the last section, which is one of my favorite topics, parking violations. All of my tickets are paid in full. I'm sure all the other council members I don't have any outstanding tickets, Madam Mayor. They've all paid. And if I get a ticket, I pay it immediately. So
My husband has one, not me.
Turn it over to, yeah, see, okay, full disclosure, make sure he pays it. Parking violations questions. Councilmember Gruber has a question regarding his ticket. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead, Councilmember Gruber.
No, my ticket's been taken care of, I promise. But I do have a question about the issuing RFP to hire a debt collection agency. I mean, in light of what we just talked about at the beginning of this section about tax liens and wanting to take on as much of this stuff in-house as we can versus asking for, hiring any debt collection firms. I'm just trying to understand what is the reason for this and what's your expected, let me rephrase. Is the reason for this in part because of what you've seen in the first 2 years of this department's existence that we're just not collecting at the rate we want to? And what are you going to do to ensure that this company, if we do go that route, does things with a soft touch?
Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So what happens is we really aggressively go to connect with motorists who don't pay, don't answer, and then if we don't try to have a collection agency, there's nothing else we can do because we're not a collection agency. We send letters, we send them for civil judgment, and the money still may not be collected. So we thought we would pattern it somewhat after what parking does. So there's groups of people who simply don't respond. And if we can get even some percentage of those funds, it would be helpful.
So in other words, we're not going to have any debt collection unless it's going to be a kind of place of the actual last resort. We're going to have tried everything, and then it's for individuals that truly do not answer. Do you have a sense of how many cases that's going to be on a yearly basis?
I can get that information for you, but the way you described it is exactly right. We have tried everything, phone calls, letters, sending them to civil judgment. It's a last case scenario, so we would do that. But I can get those numbers for you.
Just an editorial. I mean, I understand the city can't do everything. We cannot always get all of our own, do all this work ourselves, and there's good reason to subcontract some of it out. I just want to make sure that it really is always last resort, because I think what I didn't mention at the beginning of this is former Councilmember Clifford had shared a study with us early in my tenure on council that in Syracuse, just the act of handwriting letters to people who are delinquent on taxes and getting it to them saw a significant spike in payable numbers. And I just think that it's the gentler touches like that I think are less thought about, but actually can really pay dividends. And I know we're doing that in this department all over the place. And I appreciate that. I just wanted to point it out here before we go out and hire a new debt collection agency for this department.
Good. Thank you. Quickly, Councilmember Harris and then Lupien.
Hi, thank you. I'd just like to know a little bit more about the working court to implement online reduced plea offer option. I'd like to know what that is.
Yeah, and I think this pandemic has really taught us how important online work is and people's ability to connect and make payments. And so there is a program that we've been looking into that people, if they qualify, of course, there's a lot of pieces that have to be put in place. If they qualify, they can accept a reduced plea offer online, pay that online, and everything is taken care of. Greater than 80% of the people who receive tickets in our area come in to actually pay those tickets. And if they can pay them some other way without coming in, that is what they've been asking for, if they can accept plea offers. So we're working with legal, with our prosecutor to make sure that we have the legal language. We're working with another vendor who's part of NCORT, who is our third-party vendor for collection, to just make that easier and more convenient for motorists.
Thank you for that. And I look forward to seeing that as, by the way, my tickets are all paid. And so is my husband's ticket. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. I have my final question is, does these tickets appear on your credit report? I believe they do. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's, I don't
If they
know.
go
That's
unpaid?
if they go unpaid and we submit a civil judgment because they've gone so long, we're not even sending that out until it's more than 120 days. Most of the time people have more than 3 to 4 months. Most people have more than 6 months, quite frankly, to pay. So then it would, but not because somebody owes a ticket. That doesn't go on automatically.
Okay, so how much, I mean, do you have a number of what percentage of these tickets go to collections? Is that something you guys share with us?
That's something I will get. That's similar to the question that Councilmember Gruber asked. So I will get that information for you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Lupien. Councilmember Lupien.
Hi, so in the same way that if a traffic violation goes to collections, it'll end up on the credit report. So would parking. That's what I'm hearing. If the program's modeled after parking.
This isn't parking, this is traffic.
No, I know. I'm just, when I asked the question about whether or not the parking got on the credit report, it was told no, but it sounds like that's, if it goes to collections.
It goes to a collection agency. The parking tickets go to a collection agency for their active work on trying to get those funds for the city, but there are no reports made to any of the credit reporting bureaus.
Right.
From the debt collecting agencies?
Correct.
Is that the same for traffic?
Well, we haven't, so they go into what's called a default judgment status. And right now the collection agency, we don't have a collection agency at this point. So when it goes to that point, I'm not clear on that process, whether it would be part of their credit report or not.
Yeah, if that's something that we would have control over when selecting a vendor for that, I would urge that to happen, because I think, you know, all of us don't want to see, we want to build credit in our community, and for things like parking tickets or library books, which actually happened to my husband, to affect the credit report, you know, it's kind of productive from what we're really trying to do here. And, you know, and I'm glad that in, you know, other cities, it actually can end somebody up in jail. And I'm glad we don't do that here. I think we're pretty progressive, but just if at all possible to prevent that from happening with the selection of this vendor, I would ask that to happen.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, let's move on to, I want to thank the finance team for coming to the budget. We're going to take a 2-minute break just so we can recollect ourselves. We will start with the library in about 2 minutes. Section
before we go,
library section in the budget. So, yeah, President Scott.
Yes, I did have a question before we go.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, President Scott. I missed you.
I just wanted to ask Sherry, and the mayor, actually. This is like our second year. Is this our second year with this? Is it operating at the level that we expected? I see some reductions, and I don't know whether that's good or bad in terms of staff and so forth. So is it performing in the way that we had desired?
Overall, yes, it is performing the way that we desired. And the reason why we did this is, of course, because if anyone was to receive a traffic ticket within the city of Rochester, they would not be able to get their ticket reduced. They would have to then go to city court if they didn't pay it. And some people were being jailed because of it. And so we wanted to give our residents an opportunity, like the suburban towns, to actually pay this fine down and be able to make a settlement. As you can see through the documents, the majority of our residents that get these tickets in the city of Rochester actually do plea it out. And we have been, successful with making sure that we reach out to them. One of the things that happened was, of course, there was a lot of tickets that were old in the system.
Right.
And so when we took it over, basically DMV just dumped it, right? So they dumped all those tickets. And so we've been working diligently on the front end to basically clear up. We front loaded a lot of this to clear up a lot of the back traffic, contact people, tell them that they can come in and settle and things like that. And so now that we've front loaded a lot of staff in the beginning, we are in a period of where we can maintain what is coming in. Also during the COVID, as you all know, many of the state troopers and other people that would give out traffic tickets within the city of Rochester was not routinely stopping for, unless somebody was driving really erratically because of the virus. And so we did see a significant decrease in the amount of tickets, traffic violation tickets that were being issued. And so right now you see a little bit of a decrease because we believe that we are in a maintenance mode. We've cleared up all of the thousands of back tickets that we believe that we're going to be able to clear. And now it's a matter of maintaining what we currently are receiving and working with our residents to get them to either plea or to make some type of agreement to pay.
Is there anything we can do with regard to our communications to make it clearer or more appealing that this is an opportunity? I mean, it's a significant opportunity to save yourself a headache. Now, I'm just telling you because I happened to see one of the letters that it's the type of thing, you either grab your head and say, oh no, and throw it down, or you don't pay as much attention to it as perhaps you should. And I really
we can look at that. I know that we have adjusted the letter several times. So the first time, there are some legal requirements of certain language that you have to use in those letters, of course. So we can work with law and work with the Traffic Violations Bureau to take a look at that and make sure that, we encourage people to go ahead and to take the plea. A lot of times when they come in to the office and they get a chance to talk to one of the representatives, then that's when they say, oh, okay, well, fine. I'll take the plea instead of going before the judge. And so we'll look at that and see if there's some language that we can adjust in the letters. And as the letters go on in, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, they get different over time. So we'll make sure that we look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We'll now roll into the library. And I believe Ms. Shitaro, are you here? Are you on the line, Patty?
Yes, I am.
Oh, and I like that you are surrounded by books. That's very
Chairperson, want to thank you to the finance team, and you can actually exit the system now.
Finance, leave us. Perfect. Okay, Mr. Taro, I'll give you the opportunity to introduce your team, and then we'll get right into questions on the library section of the budget.
Very good. I have with me Bree Harrison, who is the finance manager for RPA, the Rochester Public Library and Monroe County Library System. Dr. Tali Reeves, who is the assistant director for the Rochester Public Library branches. Adam Traub, who is the associate director for the Monroe County Library System. And I believe that Anna Suro is also on the call. Anna is manager of library personnel.
Thank you, Mr. Taro. And colleagues, I will entertain questions on the library, and we're going to take it all together. So feel free to ask any of your questions regarding the library and any of its sections now. Councilmember Patterson, did you have a question?
Absolutely. Good to see you all in the library. We love you so much in the Northeast because we only have one library.
I knew you were going to ask this question.
So I see that there's some upcoming evaluation for the Lincoln branch. Happy to see that. It is a heavily utilized branch library because it is the only branch library in the Northeast. Yeah, it's the second time I've mentioned it. Is there a plan when, basically, Lovely, when am I getting my library, my second library in the Northeast? I mean, like, come on, man. I ain't gonna talk to Patty, I'm talking to you, Lovely. When am I getting my library? Because the Northeast needs a library. We only got one. Some folks got three. I'm just saying, I don't even know what that is. You look at the utilization of some of these libraries, especially for internet services, it doesn't even come close to what's going on in the Northeast. And again, did I mention that some folks have 3 libraries? Yeah, I think I said that for the second time too. So, Madam Mayor, when am I getting my library?
So when we can afford it is the best answer. At this point in time, we're trying to maintain and update what we have and do some upgrades to the current library system and library buildings that, of course, we need. We are in, I believe that significant capital dollars from the state budget was lost this year for libraries. We have not given up hope for the additional libraries within the city. But at this point in time, it is on hold because we have libraries that we currently have that need to be upgraded and some significant capital work needs to be done. But we're definitely looking at ways in which we can, partner with different community organization, community groups to provide some library outlets. We were looking at the La Marqueta area to do some possibly sub or a satellite services. And I know that we'll continue to explore those, but not at this point in time, in all honesty and clarity, not a full service library system, library building, because we don't have the finances to do so or the capital dollars to do so.
Well, in the course of dreaming and hoping, could I at least get a year 5 submission in the next CIP for the second Northeast Library?
We will see what we can do and evaluate that about what we can financially afford.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Mr. Tara, I know you, I was looking, I know there was a strategic plan that the library did 2016 to 20. Can you talk a little bit about that, how you think it went, and touch on any points? I know that the current environment has affected everybody, but I know the library is such a valuable treasure that we continue to have in this community, both in the city as well as in the county. You want to touch on that briefly?
Sure. The strategic plan that we initiated in 2016 was written with an overall focus on community as a high priority, with 3 areas of focus, including education and engagement, sustainability and resources, and stewardship and curation. What we found during the course of developing that strategic plan is that we had a significant part of the community that really wanted to see the library move into the 21st century, so to speak, but also hang on to some of the traditional library roles, such as stewardship and curation of materials and history particularly. I believe that we've done a decent job of working through the plan. Dr. Reeves and her staff in the branches really dug into it. The plan was written in such a way that each branch would be able to determine their own activities and priorities within the larger framework for the entire system. And they did that. You know, each branch library selected something different to concentrate on. Some libraries focused on diversifying their programs, others focused on improving their collections, others focused heavily on community outreach. I produced a fairly lengthy report for the RPL Board of Trustees last year that gives examples and highlights of activities that support the plan. And I'd be happy to share that with council if you'd be interested in seeing that.
Oh yeah, I'd be absolutely interested. Thank you.
Very good.
Councilmember Gruber.
Yes, and full disclosure, I'm a very proud representative to council on the library board. So I just want to thank Director Utaro and the whole team for all the great work that they do regularly, and certainly during COVID have stepped up to do everything they can to maintain a level of service. So thank you to everyone. I just want to ask a question about the 2 part-time positions that we're losing as part of this budget, and if there's a chance that impacts hours of operations.
At this time, we do not believe that it will impact hours of operation, assuming that we're talking about traditional hours of operation and full access to the public. We're not certain yet when that will happen. We're hoping that we'll be able to welcome our patrons back into the libraries before the end of the summer in some kind of a controlled fashion. But we do not anticipate reducing hours at any of the branches right now.
That's great to hear. What would you say is obviously this is a year where I'm sure nobody got exactly what they wanted and exactly the way they wanted it with the budget, and that's understandable, obviously. But in an ideal world, what is the staffing patterns at the libraries? Because actually, I would just hop on to what Councilmember Patterson said. Obviously, this is no fault of anyone on the phone here. This is a legacy system. But not only are the locations of the libraries all over the place, but also it seems as though so is the staffing and the programming. And I'm wondering what would be the goal to be able to make it a little bit more equitable throughout the city?
The majority of library staff right now are part-time. And where we have added full-time positions, particularly full-time librarians or full-time Safe to Be Smart staff, we have seen significant increases in nearly every performance indicator. So the ideal staffing in the branch libraries is more full-time staff.
And right now, how many does every library have some full-time staff and some part-time staff?
Every branch library has at least one full-time staff member. In most cases, those are, well, and actually in every case, a full-time staff member is the site supervisor, the branch manager. Some libraries do have full-time children's librarians, but most have part-time.
Got it. Well, I would just echo Councilmember Patterson's goal of investing in another Northeast library, but also I'd love to see us get up to having 2 full-time staff at each library and continue to make sure that they can keep serving, hours of operations can grow. We have such an incredible library system, and let's keep investing in it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just a quick question on, and I remember reading about this, about the ebooks and technology stuff.
Yes.
How's that going? The challenges? I know there was some. I'm a regular user of Audible, but I also have the library app that I love. I mean, I still read, but I do love my Audible system, and also you can listen to it in the car and when you're working, that type of thing. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. When we closed down in March, we immediately shifted all of our materials funding to the purchase of electronic content. That included beefing up our Hoopla collection, which is streaming video, audio, ebooks, music, that's available only to city residents, as well as Overdrive, which is a county system product. I would have to get you the exact numbers of the amounts that we've spent on digital content since March. It's fairly high. I do know that we're seeing increases in borrowing and overdraft in the range of 25% or more each month. The monthly report that I just received from Adam Traub gave a number, an average of about 2,500 items being borrowed a day, every day, from the overdrive system. I actually shared that on social media, and somebody came back and asked me for context, what is the average number of physical materials borrowed in the library system each day? And that is actually somewhat higher. It's about 16,000 a day of physical materials when the libraries are open. So both numbers, I think, indicate strong use of all of our libraries in Monroe County.
Great. And then a quick question also on when we were the hotspot distribution.
Yes.
How did that work out? How did that go? I know it was curbside. I heard a lot of folks talking about it. Was demand high, and how did that end up shaking out?
The demand was very high the first week that we offered it. This happened fairly quickly. We ordered 500 hotspots on March 16th, Monday, March 16th, when it became clear that everything was shutting down. We had them on Tuesday, and about 300 were processed and ready to go on Wednesday, and most of those went out. Many were borrowed from the Central Library. We provided about 50 to 60 to city employees who did not have internet access available at home. And that was a variety of departments. We also provided some to school districts that were looking to make sure that certain students and teachers had access as soon as they could. We have found since we opened for curbside pickup again on May 18th, that the demand is not as high as it was, and we're trying to figure out why that is. We're looking at ways to try and determine that. We're hearing anecdotally that school districts around the county, and particularly City School District, provided equipment to a significant number of students in the city and throughout the county. We're also hearing that people took advantage of the Spectrum deal of 3 months free. But again, that's anecdotal. We don't know for sure. So we do have some that are available right now.
So they're still available. Great.
Yes.
All right. I just think that's such a great option for our community, and I'm glad that we have that. Any other questions around libraries? Dr. Harris, Councilmember Harris, I just gave you an honorary degree.
I didn't know I became a doctor. I'm a paramedic, but not a doctor. I do have a question, just to follow up with Chairman Evans had said. I just would like to know more about how you're handling the programming virtually. I know that the library provides excellent programming that people can attend classes, computer education. How are you handling that virtually?
We have several staff who very quickly transferred their programming to a virtual environment after we closed down. And we've been using primarily Zoom and YouTube to deliver those programs. Some of the more popular ones are being done by the local history division at the Central Library. Those are routinely maxing out our Zoom account at 100 people whenever they're available, and then they're recorded and made available afterwards. We have a very active writers group that had been meeting in person at the Central Library that is now meeting virtually, and actually prefers to meet virtually is what we've heard from them. Our branch librarians, particularly our children's librarians, have responded with some really fun and interesting children's programming, story times, science experiments, crafts, and so on. And we've had some librarians who have tried to blend the virtual with the physical. Our children's librarian at the Monroe branch, for example, has done how-to craft videos that are put out through our social media channels. And then she follows that up with actually creating bags with the materials in them that she clips onto a fence in front of her home or in front of the Monroe branch. So families can walk by and pick up a bag and then go home and do the craft. She's also done some other types of programs, such as a Spot the Difference series on social media, where she has 2 photographs and you have to spot 20 differences. She just recently did an I Spy program. Overall, we've had very, very good response from our patrons on virtual programming. And we're starting to, as we're talking about bringing staff back into the buildings and allowing patrons back into the buildings, thinking about what we will continue to do virtually. Certainly the local history programs will very likely be recorded in the future and made available through live streaming. Genealogy sessions are also very heavily booked. We have a team of librarians who are also working with people on developing resumes and searching for jobs, and navigating some government websites as well.
And specifically, do you guys still offer the small business education at the, virtually as well?
Yes. Yes, the first Wednesday programs that had been done at Central for a while are now available and being done online. The Business Insight Center staff from Central are also working independently and virtually with a number of different clients. Kate Mehta, our patent librarian, spent the last semester of RIT embedded at the Simone Center for Innovation, acting as a resource for students there who were inventing things and looking for assistance on patents and trademarks. Jennifer Burns, who leads that department, has been working very closely with NextCore and University of Rochester students as well on their own business research.
Thank you. Very happy to hear that you guys were able to transition to the virtual programming. Hopefully that can continue well after COVID-19 to offer dual, offerings.
I think there will be demand for it.
Thank you.
And that's a treasure. Thank you, Congressman. A great part of our library system. Councilmember Gruber and then Lupien on library.
Yep, I couldn't let the section go without touching on the local history section. And I just want to say, just before COVID, Chairman Evans and I were down at the unveiling of a marker for the last remaining home owned by Frederick Douglass in the city. And it was remarkable. What was that? I believe on Gregory Street.
Bond Street, Bond, the corner of Bond and Hamilton.
But I mean, what an amazing resource that we have as a local history department to be able to help the community see things like that. Beautiful plaque there. I'm wondering, what is the vision for the local history department in terms of staffing and programming? If you could just give a quick 1-minute overview on that. And also related, we had a lengthy conversation this morning about records management with the IT department. And I'm just wondering, if you've worked with IT at all in terms of understanding what their vision is for records management, because certainly that has an impact on the library as well.
I'll address the last part first, and the answer to that specifically for myself is no. I have not had conversations with IT, but I know that Christine Radarski, who manages the local history department here at the library and is also a city historian, as you know, has had discussions both with the city clerk and with staff in IT regarding records management. Christine has a background in social history. She considers herself a social historian. And when we talk about a vision for the second floor of the Rundle building, it very much involves some kind of an archive and interpretation center focused on social history, social justice history of Rochester. With the staffing that we currently have, expanding into the north wing of the Rundle building is not actually feasible, but we have started to look for some additional private funding that could help begin to manage some of the collections that are coming in as donations. I know Christine is in discussions right now with the people who run Clarissa Street Reunion and the Urban League on having the library take on some of their records. During the COVID shutdown, while we've had staff working at home, her staff has been working very diligently on sort of cleaning up our image collection, which was developed initially in the 1990s when there were no standards for digital imaging and storage. So we've had thousands of images that have pretty much been sitting on servers and not made available to the public, which are being worked on now, upgraded, and eventually will be available through Rochester Images and through the library catalog. So there's a couple of different avenues that Christine is exploring, and many partnerships.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Lupian?
Yeah, I feel like my question's been answered in part, but we've been able to make some real advances in accessibility during COVID because of digital, technology, and wondering, how can we continue to do that after this is over in terms of programming and and digital content.
There's definitely a demand for both digital and physical content still. We're seeing that with the popularity of curbside pickup. People who have used that service since May 18th have been universally overjoyed that they're able to get physical materials from the library again. We are having discussions with our staff regarding access to digital content as well as physical content. Central Library and our branch libraries really have not made a huge jump in the last decade towards balancing what we spend on physical and digital content. We've spent between 4 and 8% a year of our materials budget on digital content. And that does not include database subscriptions, just e-content and so on. But we spend much more on physical materials. In the last year, we have begun to use a software product called Collection HQ, which allows our staff to analyze collection use. So we're able to really determine the success of our buyers in terms of what physical materials they're buying and whether or not they're being used. We had some startling results for the Central Library collection that excluded reference books, found that a large percentage of materials that had been purchased in the last 5 years had never circulated. So we had already started to look at rebalancing our collections based on usage, and the use of digital content, the increases in use of digital content during the shutdown. I think we're not going to be able to go back to focusing fully on physical materials. We will have to have a better balance of digital and physical.
Is a lot of the digital content subscription based? Is there, does it end up being more expensive in the long run?
Digital content is very much more expensive. A good example I can give you, and this is an ongoing issue between publishers and libraries. You can buy an audiobook on Amazon for $14.99. For the library to purchase the same e-audiobook through Overdrive it can be as high as $120 per title. For ebooks, an ebook that you can buy for yourself, or that we can buy in physical form for $10, we might pay $60 or $70 for one license for the ebook. And those licenses are only good for one user at one time. So even though the item is digital and could ideally be used by multiple people at once, we're limited to only allowing one person at a time to use it. Many publishers also have a limit on the number of times an item can circulate. So HarperCollins, for example, limits us to 26 circulations on a title before we have to buy a new license. So unlike a physical book, which we could have in our collection for 100 years, most digital books will disappear after a certain number of circulations, and then we buy again, or it's no longer in the collection. So we've had to change the way we look at developing collections. You really can't develop an ebook collection because it's so ephemeral.
Yeah, that's tricky. Good to know though. My last kind of part to this question is around programming. You know, have you kind of thought about this, and is it possible to, you know, say for like a story time, you know, have a camera set up so that you could broadcast it to people at home who may not be able to make it to the libraries?
Yes, we will very likely be doing that with many of our physical programs once we restart those.
That's awesome to hear. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Patterson, and then after that, Councilmember Pio, and we're going to break for lunch. Councilmember Patterson.
Yes, hello, Patty. You were saying earlier that there were items that didn't circulate. I'm just wondering, in general, what were those items that didn't circulate?
I would have to get back to you with some specific titles, but they covered, or they spanned all of our divisions at the Central Library. Much of what is bought for the Central Library is research related. And, you know, we've been talking about physical versus digital. Research has changed. You know, researchers don't often use physical materials unless they're doing historical research. So research related books that we would have purchased in physical format for, say, the business division or the science division are not in as much demand anymore. And that has really signaled a change in how people access information. But if you're interested, I can send you a list of some of those titles.
If you just something brief and simple, I know you guys are extremely busy, so
sure.
Don't be a librarian about it. Don't be thorough.
Okay. All right.
And
all right.
As far as the ebooks go, if it sounds like we need federal legislation on this. I mean, you know, because in my mind, a book is a book is a book. And an ebook is no different than a regular book. So if you bought it, and you own it. Mm-hmm. It's forever.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. There has been some discussion at the national level in the library world through American Library Association and New York Public Library and others about federal legislation around price gouging or price management.
Well, okay, I don't think we can do much as a city council, but we can always write a letter. So if you
right.
Direction, I think we can follow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, last question on the library is Councilmember Pio, and Councilmember Pio, you're standing between everybody and lunch, so go ahead.
I have a pretty broad question. So what I'll do is I'll email Patty directly because it can take some time to answer this. So I don't want to stop anyone.
Happy to answer.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Patty Utaro for coming and presenting the budget and taking our questions. We greatly appreciate it. The library is a treasure in this community. And I don't know where I would be in my learning had it not been for my parents and libraries. So I take my kids to them all the time, and they are just critical, especially in a city like ours. The library is something that really is a place that for a lot of people, it's the only place they have to go for access, programming, and all those things. So I want to thank you for the work that you continue to do over there. And I wish you luck as we come out of COVID and you resume programming. So
Thank you.
you so much, Patty, and
Thank
to
you
your
all.
team that came. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Folks, we're going to take a break. We're going to take a break for lunch. And then when we reconvene at 1 o'clock, we will hear from the Rochester Police Department. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a quick note, we will be reconvening at 1:10.
Yes, but early is on time is late, and late is unacceptable, Mrs. Scanlon. So I said 1 because I knew people would be there.
But our broadcast will not start until at least.
I am aware, yes.